In the last couple of decades, zombie movies have exploded into popularity like, well, the spread of a plague of the risen dead. We now have a major zombie TV series running to 11 seasons and counting, along with multiple spin-offs. A-list megastars like Brad Pitt make zombie blockbusters with budgets and box office takings in the hundreds of millions. But away from your Dawns and Shawns of the dead, there's a whole slathering horde of a smaller, weirder, and more out there undead terrors that you might not have discovered. So while a real-life deadly virus does spread across the globe, how about self-isolating, stocking up on your favourite snacks, barricading your doors, and putting on one of these 12 underrated zombie gems? I am Kirsten from WhatCulture, and these are 12 hidden gem zombie movies that you've probably never seen. Number 12. Cargo. Back in 2013, Australian duo Ben Howling and Yolanda Ramke's short about a man trying to protect his infant daughter while infected with a virus that would turn him into a zombie in 48 hours went appropriately viral on YouTube. 5 years later, its feature-length expansion was picked up by Netflix. Martin Freeman brings his embattled everyman quality to the father journeying into the Australian outback to find somewhere for his child to be safe before his time inevitably runs out. Meanwhile, the short story expands to add newcomer Simone Landers as an Aboriginal girl in the opposite situation of trying to protect her infected father. The post-apocalyptic outback setting provides new and different ground for a zombie story. This sense of a zombie story that could only have come from this particular country is present in the themes of the zombie virus as a sort of cosmic payback for the colonial atrocities committed toward Australia's original inhabitants and landscape. Cargo pushes back against the wider tendency towards modern zombie movies as comedic fun or splatterfest to create a story with real pathos where the horror elements are tied to genuine human fears of loss, both of loved ones and of oneself. Number 11. One Cut of the Dead. Released within a few months of Cargo, we have this chaotic DIY Japanese comedy, a meta-cheap zombie movie about making a cheap zombie movie. The first 40 minutes of One Cut of the Dead takes place in a single unbroken shot in which Takayuki Hamatsu's demanding director attempts to shoot a cheap zombie horror in an abandoned industrial facility, once used for secret military experiments. The film continues without cutting as the zombie film within a film gets attacked by actual zombies, or while the director enthusiastically insists his crew keep filming. The film may struggle a little to maintain this level as it moves into a more conventional structure, but it's still a remarkably inventive little comedy that doesn't hold back on the blood. Made for a meager 3 million yen, which is just about $25,000, the movie went on to take over 3 billion yen at the Japanese box office, a sensation at home that deserves to be more widely seen around the rest of the world. Number 10. The Serpent and the Rainbow. Despite the potent combination of zombies and legendary horror director Wes Craven, The Serpent and the Rainbow remains an underseen curiosity in the Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream Helmer's filmography. The film reaches back beyond Romero to the idea of zombies in Haitian voodoo traditions. Adapted from the non-fiction book of the same name by Harvard-educated anthropologist Wade Davis, The Serpent and the Rainbow is the closest thing that there is to a based on a true story zombie movie. There may be little scientific corroboration for Davis's observations of real-life zombie, Clairvius narcisse, and the possible combination of toxins, hallucinogens, and cultural beliefs that made him seen to die and then be resurrected mindless and suggestible. But they do make the basis for an original and intriguing horror film. Craven's attempt to tackle complex political and religious themes and take the zombie movie back to its roots is ambitious and doesn't always work smoothly, but it's nothing if not unique and distinct from the rest of the genre. Number 9. Anna and the Apocalypse. Whether it's Lupita Nyong'o performing Taylor Swift on a ukulele to distract from a horde of the undead in Little Monsters, or Simon Pegg bashing them with pool cues to the sound of Queen on the jukebox in Shaun of the Dead, zombie movies have often had a surprising affinity with a musical number, so it was probably only a matter of time before we got a full musical feature centred on The Walking Dead. Even so, this Scottish indie high school comedy zombie musical feature, runs through an impressive array of different genres in its 98-minute runtime. Originally a short film titled Zombie Musical from Ryan McHenry, the man behind the Vine meme, Ryan Gosling won't eat his cereal, the movie was turned into a full feature after McHenry's early death from cancer. Kicking off like a Tesco value take on Disney's High School Musical, Anna and the Apocalypse becomes both more subversive and more heartfelt as it goes, albeit never losing that cheap and cheerful charm. The cast is largely made up of unknown actors, but they handle the mix of songs and gore adeptly. In particular, Ella Hunt as the eponymous Anna marked herself as one to watch by hitting all the right notes in both her musical numbers and a performance that requires a range from silly to emotionally genuine. Number 8. The Battery. Following the pattern established by Night of the Living Dead, zombie movies have always used the threat of shambling corpses as a trigger for making small-scale interpersonal dramas that are low budget but contain an ever-present possibility of an imminent gory death. 2012's The Battery, the debut film from director-star Jeremy Gardner, made for just $6,000, is such a movie. An episodic road movie focused on just two guys, Gardner and Adam Cronheim, as a pair of former baseball pros, rather than an epic struggle for survival. The Battery largely focuses on its twin protagonists' different attitudes to adjusting to the post-apocalyptic world. While Gardner's Ben is a dedicated survivalist using his baseball bat skills to bash in undead skulls, Cronheim's Mickey lives in apocalypse denial, burning through batteries listening to a retro Discman. Nevertheless, the two work pretty well together until the introduction of the greatest threat to the status quo in any zombie flick: other survivors. The discovery of a set of walkie-talkies and the voice of a female survivor on the other end upsets Ben and Mickey's eccentric equilibrium, leaving things spiralling towards a downbeat conclusion. It's not in these larger plot contrivances that The Battery excels though, but rather in the minor, well-observed little details of the mundane trials and pleasures of surviving in a world in the midst of destruction. Number 7. Colin. Promoted with the tagline "The 45-pound zombie movie," Colin was shot on an old handheld camcorder using digital tapes that a TV studio were throwing away, and edited by director Mark Price on his laptop using a version of Adobe Premiere that had come bundled with a video capture card that he already owned. Actor Alistair Curtin agreed to perform the title role for free, and the zombie performers were volunteers recruited through adverts on Facebook and MySpace. The whole movie focuses on a single character travelling through London after being bitten and turned to a zombie. It may be expectedly rough around the edges, but Colin does a good job of showing the poignancy of the small lingering shreds of vestigial humanity in its virtually brain-dead protagonist. Number 6. Wasting Away. Colin may have had the look of virtually no production budget, but at the same time another zombies point of view movie was being made with an even more innovative perspective. That's because the zombies in Wasting Away, sometimes known as zombies, don't actually know that they're zombies at all. In this cult comedy, Matthew Davis accidentally turns himself and his friends to zombies thanks to a mix of soft scoop ice cream and an experimental toxic military serum. As far as the gang's concerned though, they're all fine. It's just that everyone else around them has suddenly become super fast moving and talking, not to mention irrationally gun-totingly aggressive whenever they come near. Wasting Away has some creative ideas around the concept of the sped-up world from the oblivious zombies' perspective. Every so often, we switch from the zombies' view to how they are perceived by everyone else, and the movie swaps to a black and white horror aesthetic, while there's a fun bit about drunks being the only ones to see and understand the undead as real people. With a game cast and some inventive set pieces, Wasting Away does a good job of affectionately and gorily skewering the cliches of the zombie genre, making it a must-watch for fans of the likes of Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland. Number 5. I Walked with a Zombie. Long before the tropes of the modern zombie movie were established with Night of the Living Dead, there was White Zombie. Made in 1932 as a vehicle for Bela Lugosi's newly minted Dracula stardom, White Zombie was the first ever zombie film. It's also really not very good. That's not to say though that the pre-Romero genre of Haitian-influenced zombie movies is not without its gems. In particular, 1943's I Walked with a Zombie stands out as the best of the pack. Like The Serpent and the Rainbow, I Walked with a Zombie was inspired by a non-fiction source, in this case an article that was written by Inez Wallace for American Weekly Magazine. In reality though, this has very little relation to the plot, which is instead a reworking of Jane Eyre set in a Caribbean plantation and inspired by Haitian voodoo legends. Like Tourneur's other early horrors, I Walked with a Zombie is ripe with uncomfortable atmosphere and ambiguity about the degree to which the events are supernatural or psychological. A very different movie from the shambling hordes of flesh eaters that we see in zombie stories today. I Walked with a Zombie is nevertheless well worth revisiting for fans of classic horror. Number 4. The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. During the era in which Romero's trilogy of the Dead first inspired widespread interest in the zombie threat, a whole host of low-budget Italian and Spanish knockoffs were released with varying degrees of quality and success. But the real gem of the genre is this Spanish cult classic from 1974. Despite the title, only the opening scene of the movie happens in Manchester, with the actual body of the story happening in the English countryside, theoretically the Lake District, although much of it was shot in Italy. That's probably why the movie was released with no less than 15 other names. If you've heard of it, you may have heard it called Let Sleeping Corpses Lie or Don't Open the Window. But whatever it's called a zombie classic for a good reason. The movie features Anglo-Italian actor Ray Lovelock and Spanish actress Cristina Galbo as young Brits having to fend off both the revenant dead brought back by shady agricultural experiments and an aggressive local police officer who suspects them of the spate of recent deaths. Director George Grau brought a strong sense of the era's counterculture and environmental paranoia, but also an atmosphere that is tense and macabre. If you watch any 70s zombie flick after Dawn of the Dead, make it this one. Number 3. FIDO. Coming on like the love child of Pleasantville and Day of the Dead, FIDO is a zomcom that views the zombies as just a lovable, quirky, and only occasionally infectiously deadly extension to the nuclear family. Taking place in a sort of parallel 1950s suburbia, where the gated communities are that way because of the space radiation that resurrects the dead as brainless walking corpses, Fido's world is one in which zombies can be domesticated. Through a controlling collar, the Walking Dead, like Billy Connolly's title character, can be made to help out with menial household tasks. Of course, as it's inevitable in any zombie scenario, the collars malfunction and chaos ensues. Yes, there's blood and gore, but it's in the context of an oddly wholesome story which both satirises traditional family values while pointing towards the strength in alternate and found families. The oddball Canadian comedy was a box office bomb on release in 2007, but its unique outlook and style mean that it thoroughly deserves to be rediscovered today. Number 2. Seoul Station. With Parasite's shock Oscar Best Picture win, there has never been more attention on the movies of South Korea. That attention has helped Yong Sang-ho's tense and fast-paced Train to Busan to remain one of the most discussed and recommended zombie films of recent years. That film is not the director's only zombie work though. Less than a month after Train to Busan, this companion movie arrived and flew a little under the radar for international audiences. It deserves to be seen though for fans of both zombies in general and Yeon's breakout hit specifically. Narratively a prequel set around the station in which Train to Busan begins, Seoul Station hews closer in style to Yeon's earlier film King of Pigs, in being a violent animated feature about the underbelly of Korean society. Here a sex worker, her no-good boyfriend and her father attempt to navigate the zombie outbreak from a place of far less privilege than Busan's banker hero. Less kinetic and more downbeat and pessimistic than its sister film, Seoul Station, like the Oscar-winning Parasite, gives a glimpse into the world of those living on the margins in Korean society. A third installment in the series, Peninsuela, is out this summer and moves the story on into the post-outbreak world. Anybody looking forward to that would do well to see Seoul Station first. Number 1. Pontypool. At first glance, Pontypool's setup is the stuff of 1,000 cheap zombie flicks, a group of clashing individuals in a boxed-in, small-town location, in this case Stephen McCarthy's early morning shock jock radio DJ and his producer and engineer in snowy Ontario, seek to survive during a viral outbreak and the subsequent siege scenario. And sure, this film from punky experimental Canadian director Bruce McDonald has a nice line and claustrophobic tension. The radio station setting allows for a situation which recalls Orson Welles' legendarily panic-inducing dramatisation of War of the Worlds, with elements of the story told through reports coming in from the outside world in which neither we nor the characters on screen are ever quite sure what to believe. But Pontypool is also much more unusual and innovative than that. If its setting of a handful of people in a radio booth seems talky, then there's a very good reason for that. In this story, it isn't biting or blood that spreads the zombifying virus. It's words. Pontypool is a film that is thoroughly wordy and linguistically creative. McCarthy's performance is both rich in vocal tones, and he has a great radio voice, and emotional complexity. It's a movie in which the sign of degeneration into zombiehood is in repetitive or misused language, attaching genuine tension to the slightest malapropism. In our present mass of contradictory broadcasts and fake news about the current viral crisis, Pontypool is perhaps a more pertinent viewing experience experience than ever. And there we go, the 12 hidden gem zombie movies that you've probably never seen. If you liked this video, then give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, then click that subscribe button. But for now, I have been Kirsten Ria from WhatCulture, and I'll see you in the next video. Oh no.